Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. Dzień dobry. It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome all of you in our webinar. It is fabulous that so many people from different organizations and countries decided to take part in our event. I hope it will be a good time for everyone and interesting, fruitful discussion. Why should we discuss?
Dlaczego powinniśmy rozmawiać o trwałych użytkach zielonych, o trawie?
Beautiful poem written in 1955 by Mabel Duggan titled Grass. It's a part of the introduction to book written and edited by Joan Frey. I have written of dawn, of the moon and the trees, of people and flowers and song of the bees. But over these things my mind would pass and come to rest among the grass. Grass so humble that all things tread its tender blades. Grass, the bread, the stuff of life, a constant need of man and beast, a power indeed. Why did we decide to organize stakeholder meeting in Poland? Because permanent grassland in Poland, characterized by high biodiversity and play an important role in animal husbandry and feeding, but also have unique meaning in environmental protection, birds and plant species conservation, especially on the wet habitats located on the peat soils. The compromise between different goals, agriculture production, environmental conservation, water management, soil conservation, in practice, it is not easy. And sometimes we observe even some conflicts between different groups of stakeholders. I think that you need some basic information about Polish agriculture and Polish permanent grassland. So please look at this slide. I would like to stress also that we have about 3 million, more than 3 million hectares of permanent grassland. And we have also 23 national parks in Poland. Some of them are located in lowland area and they are oriented for swamps and permanent grassland conservation. Especially, I would like to pay your attention for Biebrza National Park, Nadnarwiński National Park, Ujście Warty and Polecki Park. Those parks are located mostly on organic soils and permanent grassland play important role inside those parks. After the long discussion in our consortium of our project, we have decided to invite people to Biebrza National Park. The name of that park comes from the name of animal, beaver. And just a moment. Okay, these animals are rather rare in Europe, but still common on that area. Spring seems to be the best period to show our guests beauty of grassland and birds diversity, which are very big attraction for researchers and tourists from different countries. We should be now here in Goniądz, in the headquarters of the Biebrza National Park. But due to pandemic, we had to change the time of our meeting. Finally, we almost win the coronavirus, but terrible war here just near our border began. And for security of our guests, we have to take the painful decision. And instead of meeting face to face, it was necessary to organize only virtual online meeting. Even now, when we are still here in quiet and safety places to discuss about grassland, biodiversity, agriculture, and so on, we should remember that Ukraine is fighting bravely, so please think about our friends in Ukraine. Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine. Before starting our program, I just want to say that the inspiration of our discussion could be the words said by my two big masters, Professor Barbara Rutkowska, and former head of Grassland Department in my university in Warsaw, and Dr. John Frame from UK, Honorable President of European Grassland Federation. She said, human subsistence, as well as life of majority of animal species without grasses, would be not possible. Yet grass is more Yet grass is more than a feedstuff. It's Mother Earth's green carpet and always plays an important role in the quality of life of mankind, whether for natural landscape and for recreation and sport. So I think it's time for official opening of our webinar. And according to our program, the first speaker is Dr. Paul Newell-Price from ADAS, the main coordinator and leader of SUPER-G project. Paul, the floor is exactly more precisely, the screen is yours. Thank you for attention. Paul, it is your turn now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Piotr, for that welcome, that great welcome. If you unshare your screen, I'll then share my slides for the introduction and overview of the SUPER-G project. So hopefully you can see my screen now. Okay, can you hear me clearly and see the screen? So yeah, with great pleasure to see everybody, even if it's not face-to-face, and very much looking forward to the webinar. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction about the SUPER-G project as a whole, just go over the main objectives and a few of the different dimensions and aspects of the project, and just touch upon the focus of the webinar we've got today. So in terms of the overall objectives of the project, I've got four main ones. It is a multi-actor approach we're using. So we're working with farmers, advisors, policymakers, civil society groups, non-governmental organizations. So a lot of people involved. And the first objective is really to better understand the importance and functioning of permanent grassland within Europe. And that's looking at the importance from a natural science perspective, but also a social science perspective, which I will touch upon in a bit. The second thing is to benchmark PG performance across Europe. And by PG performance there, we not only mean grassland yield and livestock performance, but also the delivery of multiple ecosystem services, which again, I'll touch upon in a moment. We're then looking to co-develop integrated approaches for profitable and sustainable PG management. So really trying to hone down and decide for ourselves and with stakeholders what we mean by sustainable permanent grassland management. And by that we mean that the management is meeting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And perhaps we also mean that it is contributing to meeting current challenges in terms of climate change and the biodiversity crisis. So contributing to human well-being and also performing within the planetary boundaries defined by people such as Kate Raworth. The final objective is to co-develop tools and policy mechanisms. So looking to develop tools for farmers, so they're able to demonstrate how they are delivering across the ecosystem services when they manage their permanent grassland, and also tools for policymakers to look at how changes to management, changes to stocking rates, changes to the way we manage PG can also alter the delivery of ecosystem services at various scales, and then finally contributing to different sort of policy options for policymakers. So those are the sort of main objectives. I've talked about permanent grassland quite a bit, but what do we mean by permanent grassland within this project? And here's the definition. Really, we're talking about anything that has grass, herbs, legumes on it, can be grazed or mown, and hasn't been part of an arboral rotation for 5 years or more. So it's land that may have trees on it or may not have trees on it, but it can be used agriculturally with grass and herbs grown on it. So it covers a whole range of situations. It includes farms that may have arable land on it, may have temporary grassland, maybe only a bit of permanent grassland, but also farms which are totally permanent grassland with grassland that perhaps has never been cultivated. So we're dealing with a whole range of situations. I talked about benchmarking of performance and performance in terms of ecosystem services. I'll just touch upon the different ecosystem services that we're covering here. Stanislav Hejduk from Mendel University will cover this in more detail later. But clockwise from top left, dealing with the service of biodiversity and pollination. And then to the right, we have a pile of manure on grassland representing carbon storage, I think that is. So we're looking at that in terms of the wider service of climate regulation, so carbon sequestration and regulation of greenhouse gas emissions. We're then also looking at the importance of PG for water quality, and then bottom right, the importance for food production. And then at the bottom on the center, we're also looking at it in terms of landscape and recreation and cultural values. And then finally, bottom left, the importance for mediation of water flows, preventing flooding and erosion control. So a whole range of system services that we're looking at within the project, but the focus today is on this this conflict potentially sometimes between delivering for biodiversity and delivering for food production, how we can maybe do that at the same time in some places, or at least reserve some space for nature and biodiversity. Another direction of the project is working across Europe, so across a number of biogeographic regions. And here's a map of the main biogeographic regions across Europe. The ones we're working within and focusing on are alpine regions, Atlantic, the boreal, continental regions, Mediterranean, and the Pannonian. And within the project, we have 22 partners across 14 countries. And the map on the bottom right just shows those countries and how they are spread across the biogeographic regions and those 6 biogeographic regions that we're focusing on. So I mentioned earlier we're working across the natural sciences and also the social science. I've just got one slide to represent some of the work that we're doing in terms of creating a new typology for grasslands, for permanent grasslands, and also a new classification for farming systems based on permanent grassland. I'd just like to acknowledge this slide from Simona Rovetto Henry and Giampiero Lombardi at University of Turin, and also inspired by our late friend Dario Sacco, also at Turin. This map just shows how livestock species, or how farms dominated by livestock species, certain livestock species on PG, or on farms based on PG, are distributed across Europe. So the classification that's been developed has various levels, including the dominant livestock species, which is what this map represents. But then we also have looked at stocking rates on total utilized agricultural area, the permanent grassland share on the farm, and the exploitation regime in terms of whether grass is mainly cut or mainly grazed, or a mixture of the two. So this map here is just showing within each region, within that region, the dominant livestock species or the dominance of the farms in terms of the main livestock species on farm. And colleagues have used Farm Accountancy Data Network data to produce these maps. So that's just a little bit on some of the work that's been done on the natural science side. The other sort of main dimension of the project is the social science side, where we're working with farmers, doing surveys with farmers, interview with farmers, but also with citizens to think about priorities, preferences, attitudes, and behaviours around permanent grassland and its management. And I'll just acknowledge Sophie Tyndale from University of Newcastle, who produced this slide, which is derived from the initial focus groups with citizens. So looking at understanding the drivers of citizen attitudes towards and values associated with permanent grassland. And you can see the various associations there. We just pick out associations of the qualities of the landscape and the sorts of things that were expressed, and people talk about the variety and the diversity provided by permanent grasslands and permanent grasslands within the landscape, the biodiversity they provide, fresh air, beauty, meadow flowers, but there are many other associations. These focus groups were carried out in 5 different countries to represent the 5 of the biogeographic regions. So we did them in the UK, Spain, Czech Republic, Switzerland, and Sweden. And here are just a few quotes from in Spain, the Dehesa landscape in Spain, saying how people feel that it's part of their natural heritage. It's a jewel in the landscape. One person said that they were in love with the Dehesa, so a very valued landscape. And in the UK, one person just saying that just walking through the fields, it's nice to be out and about, when it's quiet, and appreciating the fresh air, relaxation, and the green space. So all this work that the farmer survey, the citizen survey, will contribute towards how people sort of value permanent grassland and the sort of management and support that should be prioritized in terms of preserving permanent grassland and conserving it. So just a quick summary. The culmination of the project, we hope by the end, and we're working toward, is this better understanding of the importance and functioning of PEG from a natural science and social science perspective. The work we're doing with farmers across the farm networks, we're hoping to increase the availability and uptake of sustainable PEG management options and technologies where appropriate, thereby improving the competitiveness of farming systems based on permanent grassland. And finally, providing options for policies that support the optimal management of permanent grassland. So with that, I'll thank you, and I think I'll hand back to Piotr for the next speaker.
Thank you, Paul. It was very exciting, and I think the idea of SUPER-G is very interesting, not only for us, for grassland people, but for everybody. And now we should change the place so we can travel in virtual to Biebrza National Park. And I think that the floor and the screen is given now to Artur Wiatr. Mr. Wiatr, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Piotr. Good morning, everyone. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, it's okay.
All right. So once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting Biebrza National Park for this webinar and to give a chance to show and share our experience and good practices with the management of permanent grasslands, which is taking place in Biebrza National Park. It's pity we couldn't meet over here. Well, nevertheless, warm and cordial welcome from the Biebrza National Park. It's a bit cloudy today, so you probably, in terms of weather, you don't miss very much, but it's always good to hear out and enjoy the beauty and the richness of the natural jewels, as it was said in the previous presentation of our park. So let me present the topic which we titled The Role and the Main Tasks of Biebrza National Park in Active Protection of Permanent Grasslands. Before we go into details, let me make a short introduction about the Biebrza National Park.
Artur?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you just put it in presentation mode?
All right. Yeah. Is it? Can you see it now?
Not yet. We are seeing the screen, but it's not in presentation mode, so we are seeing all the other slides as well.
Okay.
Below you
I have already turned into presentation mode, so it should be on in a second.
Okay, thank you.
Is it?
Not yet. Okay, no worries. If it's not going to presentation mode, we can keep like that. Thank you.
Well, I have a presentation mode on my screen, so maybe due to the internet connection, maybe it
no worries, no worries. Maybe it takes a bit long. No worries. Thank you.
All right. Well, maybe once again. Has it changed?
No.
Sure.
No, there's no problem. Okay, thank you. You can keep.
All right. So a short introduction to Biebrza National Park. From international point of view, for the international recognition, a few words. So the Biebrza National Park was inscribed on the Ramsar list, so the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. The park is on the list since 1995. The park has also been internationally recognized as an important bird area of global significance by the BirdLife International. And of course, we are within Natura 2000 networks, both important special protection area and special area of conservation. Well, the park itself, as it was mentioned by Piotr, Biebrza National Park is located in northeast corner of Poland, very close to Belarus border. Well, you can see my arrow probably. So whatever is right from the arrow, it's already Belarus. And the park starts very close to Belarus border. It's the biggest national park in Poland. It covers nearly 60,000 hectares. And additionally, to support the protection in the park, there is a buffer zone created around the park, which amounts up to nearly 67,000 hectares. So bearing in mind the European conditions of Central Europe, it's altogether more than 120,000 hectares, which, having the status of high protection, it's a really huge area. What is also interesting and important to mention is the ownership in the Biebrza National Park. Can you see that my presentation very well?
We are seeing, but it's not moving. The slides aren't forwarding. So
okay, so
the first slide.
Yeah,
just the first slide. So well, let me try to repeat from the very beginning then. So I will stop the sharing now.
Okay, maybe it's easier.
And we will try once again.
Okay, thank you.
Does it work?
Yes, now it's okay.
In presentation mode.
Okay, now.
Right. So thank you. Probably I clicked on the wrong button. So this was already. Okay, and we have talked about this. Now the map. You haven't seen the map. So once again, Biebrza National Park is the biggest national park in Poland. It covers nearly 60,000 hectares. Additionally, around the park, there is a buffer zone of another 67,000 of hectares. So altogether, it's a huge protected area. As I mentioned, you can see the map of the park. It is divided into 3 parts, 3 basins. This is upper part, which starts very close to Belarus border. This is middle part, and here is Gonions, where we're supposed to meet today, and lower basin as a 3rd part. What is important to mention, important to note, is the ownership within the park boundaries. Unfortunately, not 100% is owned by the park. You can see it's only 60%, nearly 61% of the area is under park ownership, which of course, in terms of management, makes the situation a bit complicated, but I will mention about it in a minute. And what are the main types of land types or ecosystems? You can see that according to the register, nearly one third of the park is covered by the forest, but the rest of it are the most important open ecosystem. Is the most important open ecosystem built of the barren and the meadows. And of course, we have some water courses, some shrub lands, and some other types of vegetation, type of land. Okay. Now, excuse me. All right. Now to going more into details, we mentioned about the complicated situation of ownership. Additionally, you can see the mosaic of plots, which results in difficulties in the implementation of active protections. You can see the green color indicates the land which is owned by the state, by the national park, and the other colors indicates private ownership or different bodies of ownership, mainly private. And you can see that the plots very often are very narrow. For example, this one is only 15 meters wide and it's only 800 meters long. So you can imagine when we plan the management activities, it's very, very challenging, you know, to make a proper plan having such a mosaic of plots. Excuse me. Well, if we talk about grasslands, so of course, in case of Biebrza National Park, we have different types of grasslands, and here you have 6 basic examples of what grasslands means to Biebrza National Park. So different types of grasslands, important ones. The top left with the tussocks, important for birds nesting and other animals, and all different types from based on organic soil, of course. Okay, and of course, if we use the term grasslands, that means that it's a proper habitat, and actually it's an umbrella habitat for many rare and important, globally speaking, important species. So it's a sort of umbrella for example, such important bird as aquatic warbler, for which Biebrza National Park is one of the most important refuge all over the world. And another example, this is a fan orchid. So if we talk about grasslands, that means that is an umbrella for many rare habitats and flora and fauna. And about the richness of fauna, especially ornithofauna, my colleague Piotr will talk in a minute. Well, now what is the main challenge of the management of the grasslands? Here you can see a slide, a picture showing what is going on when you left the permanent open grassland uncultivated, untouched. Very soon, very quick, secondary succession is taking over. Pioneer trees, especially birch, is very quickly overgrowing the open space, which results in loss of important habitats, both for flora and fauna. So this is the main challenge: how to manage the open grasslands, how to keep it open and make it suitable for the richness and the importance of the habitats and flora and fauna presented there. Well, management, grassland management has to be also taken or discussed historically. And from the present state, we can say that was a very difficult, very tough job. But on one hand, on the other, it was very easy because local farmers, local societies, they were forced to make a profit, to make their life going on. So you can see two examples, historical pictures, how the open grassland management was taking place in the past. It was, in many cases, a family gathering. The whole villages actually were gathering for haymaking. So it was very important for the grasslands management itself, but also to make a profit for the families. But from social point of view, it was also, I guess, quite important to meet all together, to talk, to sing, probably, just enjoy themselves, yourselves, while keeping the haymaking and so on, so on. Here you have a kind of time scale how the management, the grassland management was changing throughout the time. Well, very difficult, but very simple, and probably the most effective way of management was just mowing the grasslands by the side, by hands. And it was taking place from the 16th century until the 70s and 80s of the last century. Then we tried to switch from hand to mechanic equipment. So we tried to use tractors with different devices used for the mowing. Then, of course, we discovered that, okay, it's not going to be easy. Let's try to find out some more efficient equipment for mowing. Here we have a machine which was a kind of prototype offered by one of our colleagues from Sweden. But for some reason, the machine did not work, the harvester did not work properly in our conditions, so we have to look for another solutions. And then, suddenly, in 2007, we found out that a typical piston bull, which is used in the mountains to prepare ski trails and so on, that the harvester itself, that the base itself, it could be quite useful in our conditions. So some of the farmers, some of the operators, they use the piston bulls with special header for mowing. And you can see it was developing throughout the time, different approaches, mowing by itself or mowing with a direct taking off the biomass from the fields. And now, of course, we still use this machinery, we still use this approach, but of course it's a question mark, because throughout the time we can observe well, good results and some bad results of using this type of tractors, let's say. So together with cooperation from different institutions, private bodies, different operators, we try to develop better equipment, which so far is not that easy. Of course, the management itself needs some financial support. And for a long time, we were having problems how to financially support our management activities, mowing. And then finally, common agricultural policy and rural development program, especially the agro-environmental climate scheme, brought us a financial solution. And as you know, Poland joined European Union in 2004, and since then we apply agro-environmental climate schemes nowadays to help us with the grassland management, to keep the open ecosystems open, and of course the money which is behind greatly supports the whole activities. And within this platform, let's say, we all cooperate, of course, with the European Union, but also with the Ministry of Agriculture in Poland and different bodies associated. Okay. How the active protection is carried out nowadays. So you can see two pictures on the left. We still try and we highly promote farmers which would like to use old and traditional ways, traditional machinery. So simple tractors, trailers, and the hay, taking off the meadows in winter time when the ground is frozen, or haystacks, which was also an important element of the landscape here in the Biebrza National Park. But this is rather in minority. Majority of active protection based on these piston bulls, and unfortunately doesn't look as nice as the pictures on the left. But on such a large scale is quite effective way of management. We also use two approaches if we talk about the different types of activities. One approach is the long-term leasing program. So every year we organize a public tender to different operators, to contractors, which are going to lease the land from the park under, of course, certain conditions. First of all, bearing in mind nature protection needs. So once a year we organize such a public tender, and you can see this is an example from 2021. You can see different numbers, total area leased, which doesn't mean that the activities are taking place on the whole area. Here you can have the map. Here we have the map with the brownie color indicating the number of grants which was leased in 2021, and of course you can see it differs. It differs in different parts of the park. So the middle basin, excuse me, and the lower basin are these two parts of the park when the long-term leasing is taking place in the most. And mainly it's that the ground which is under the leasing program, of course, is mechanically mown. Here you have the graph on the right side of the slide. We also use the hand mowing with the not with the sides, unfortunately, but with the the mechanical sides, if I can say so. And minority on a very, very small scale, also grazing is taking place. Okay, and another approach. So one approach, the first approach is the long-term lease to different operators outside of the national park, but also we as a park, we also implement the agro-environmental climate schemes by ourselves. It's taking place mainly in the upper basin of the Biebrza National Park, and you can see in total in 2021 we have been operating on an area which amounts up to 600 hectares. All right, and another challenge, another advantage which parallelly goes with the active management is the biomass. As you can imagine, 7,000 hectares under permanent activity brings a huge amount of biomass. And of course, in the past it was easy because most of the biomass was used on the farms for bedding mainly. Sometimes for feeding, but well, as you all know, it's a low quality feeding. It's a low quality feeding possibility. Therefore, the hay and well, the grass taken off of the park was mainly used for the bedding. And now, of course, it's a big challenge what to do with the huge amount of the biomass. We try to develop different approaches. Here we have an example. The pellet workshop, which was created by one of the non-governmental organization, Society for Bird Protection. But unfortunately, they couldn't make a profit. They couldn't even make a balance, zero balance between the production and the cost. This system did not work out for the time being, and now we are trying to look for another solutions, another methods. We try to find out whether the biomass could be used as a biofuel, maybe as a compost, or maybe as another solution as well. But so far, these are all projects ahead of us. Well, I guess this is all for the time being. Thank you for your attention, and I would like also acknowledge my colleague Magda Marczakiewicz, one of my colleagues from the park. She put a lot of efforts to make this presentation ready for today. So thank you, Magda. But also Piotr Marczakiewicz is going to present another topic about the richness of the fauna, especially ornithofauna. So at this moment, I would also would like to thank Piotr and support him with his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Artur. It was great to hear the huge spectrum of your activity in park, from the very traditional point of view and traditional management until the present time to very modern technique, and I think it's a very good spectrum for the huge discussion about the different problems on the Biebrza National Park. Thank you so much. I think, in my opinion, it was really very interesting presentation. And now we should change the climate, and we should change maybe also the landscape from the lowland, from the swamps to Czech Republic and to ecosystem services. So I see Stanislav is ready. Stanislav, please, screen is yours. We are hear you.
Fine. Thank you, Piotr, for the interaction. I just would like to know if you can see the first slide of my presentation.
Yes, it's okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation for the presentation about the topic. As you can see, ecosystem services and permanent grassland management. As you know, probably the permanent grasslands plays very important role in the agriculture, but also in the landscape ecology. And I think that many farmers and also the public is not always fully aware of the term of ecosystem services. What does it mean? And I'd like to speak a little bit more about it today. So in the picture you can see here is a permanent grassland or permanent meadow in the Bohemian Moravian upland, just between Prague and Brno, which is, I think, more than 100 years old, probably a couple of centuries old. And it is just the last rest of the permanent grasslands which stay in this area, because most of them were plowed down or transformed to arable land within 1970s. It was the main era of agriculture intensification in our country. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about these points you can see here. So firstly, I'd like to overview the ecosystem services. Then I have also one slide devoted to the changes of permanent grassland area in some European Union.
Stanislav, I am sorry, but we still can see only the first slide, so it is not moving now.
Okay, so I tried to do it as my colleague before, and I tried to repeat it. Maybe it's better.
Can you put it in the presentation mode, please?
Yeah, I have it in my screen already, in the presentation mode, but you still see the previous one, yeah?
Yes, exactly. We are still with the first one, just.
Okay, so I try to do it once more. So it's sharing the presentation, and now you can see the whole screen, or just the what was before.
It's not being shared yet.
And now I try to go to the presentation mode. I can see it in my screen already, but
it's not yet being shared.
Okay, so I try to keep the previous mode. Maybe it's better. Sorry for the troubles. Okay, so can I keep this mode? I don't know if you.
Yes, you can. You can, and then just try to see if it goes to the next slide. Okay, now it's working. Okay,
now it's fine. Okay, so sorry for the troubles, but hopefully it will be visible. Okay, I will continue with this with these points. I'd like a little bit mention the conflict between farmers and conservationists, because I think it's very topical also to the Biebrza National Park, and permanent grassland management also influence very much the ecosystem services. So it should be the main part of the topic of the presentation. And on one slide, I'd like to compare the ecosystem services which are provided by cropland and, which is provided by permanent grassland better than by cropland. And on the end, some conclusions. Okay, so in our project SUPER-G, we are focusing on following ecosystem services. There are 7 of them. So the first 3 you can see in this slide. So probably the most important for farmers is production of forage. So they are very interested about increasing yield and forage quality from permanent grasslands. And as the forage is not the market product, they need to transform the forage to meat and milk. So then they can sell it and receive some money. So the production is affected by climate, of course. Then soil fertility is a very important factor. Some farmers use sward renewal. So after renewal, usually they increase the yield and quality, but it's not possible in all cases. In the case when farmers use grazing, the management of grazing also affect the forage quality and the yield. And of course, the botanical composition is very important for production. Then today is a very, very topical climate regulation, as we are in the era of climate change. The people are, especially the public, are very interested in emissions of greenhouse gases, which are affected also by grassland management and land use. As I will mention later, grasslands are very important for carbon sequestration and also protection of carbon stocks in the soil is very important if we have permanent grasslands. You know probably that water quality is affected also by presence of grasslands in landscape, and not just underground water, but also the surface water. And you can see also by which is affected. Concerning biodiversity, permanent grasslands are known as a very important ecosystem, especially in Europe, which harbor the highest number of plant, insects, bird species, and other organisms. And the biodiversity is affected very much by management practices, as you can see, also by environment, history of site, seed bank, and you can see also the timing of harvest can change the biodiversity very much. Permanent grasslands are also very important for reduction of risk of erosion and flooding. And we can affect, or farmers can affect it by stocking rate. Usually higher stocking rate mean higher risk. Bare soil proportion is also negative for this erosion and flooding control. And bulk density of soil is also a very good indicator for this ecosystem services. And we have also the pollination services, which are important for not just for farmers, but also for some other ecosystems. And the reason why grasslands are so important is that legumes and other forms are producing nectar, and they are very important for feeding the pollinators. And the last one, it's I know what happened. It was the touristic and recreation value. It's also very, very important for, especially for public. And you can see on the bottom right picture the situation in We call it Moravia and Amazonia. It should be the nation park in our country, maybe following year. It's on the border with Slovakia and Austria, where there are a couple thousand hectares of flooded meadows, and it's very attractive for many peoples, and especially for cyclists, as you can see. The next slide shows you the positive externalities, which are connected with the ecosystem services usually, and they are or they should be in future the main reason why farmers receive the subsidy payments. Sometimes farmers do not know exactly why they receive the subsidies. They sometimes complain that they would be more happy without any subsidies, but in this case the subsidies should be connected with positive externalities or the ecosystem services I mentioned already. Concerning the area of permanent grasslands in some countries in Europe, I received the trend in selected countries. As you can see here, there are 8 countries from European Union, and you can see the changes between 1970s and 90s, and then 1990 to 2020. And what surprised me, some countries, especially Czech Republic and Slovakia, has increased in the area since 1990s. It was the political change in our countries. And you can see they are the only countries I found that increased the permanent grassland area in agricultural land since 1990. So the era between 1970 and 1990, it was almost everywhere, with exception of Slovenia, everywhere where the areas of permanent grasslands were going down. But until 1990, it continues, but the exception were 2 countries, Czech Republic and Slovakia. So I know what is the reason why those 2 countries are completely different than the others. But generally, the area of permanent grasslands in Europe are declining. Okay, so in this picture you can see the way how the permanent grasslands can be changed to arable land. For many farmers, especially today, because the war in Ukraine increased the prices of food, and it became more attractive to cultivate or produce some crops on arable land instead of forage from permanent grasslands. So that's increased pressure from farmers to change or transform their permanent grasslands to arable land. So we will see what will be the future. Concerning the protected area, this is the picture from White Carpathians protected area, which lays between Czech Republic and Slovakia. And this is the picture from very dry and hot year in 1918. And the picture shows the meadow, the first growth before the first cut in August, or it's much later than its traditional term for cutting of hay. And the reason why it's so late is very low yield of this meadow. You can see on the end, the farmers harvest just 800 kilograms of hay from 1 hectare, what is usually at about 1/3 of the standard yield. Also, the forage quality was very poor, and the botanical composition is not also perfect. But the problem is that the farmers are not allowed to use any fertilizer. They can't use renewing of these grasslands. So it it caused the conflict, especially in dry years, because in standard years, the forage is enough for feeding of animals. But in this case, it was the third dry year in the line. So the stocks of the forage was depleted, and the conflicts were a problem, became a problem. In this picture, I'd like to show you just few differences between the permanent grasslands and temporary grasslands concerning the ecosystem services. It's the graph from the publication of our colleague René Shields, which was published this year. And you can see just the most important differences, which are marked by red arrows. So you can see the permanent grassland generally has lower yield than the temporary or renewed grasslands. Then you can see that also the plant richness is much lower, the threatened species presence is much lower, and also the carbon sequestration is much lower when we have permanent grassland compared to a temporary grassland or even arable land. Okay, so I'd like to highlight some ecosystem services. For farmers, of course, the most important is the forage production, or in pastures is animal production. As I told you, it can be used directly for human nutrition as crops, and we need to transform it to livestock, by livestock to meat, milk, wool, or hide. The dry matter yields range very much more than crops on arable land. So we can have the yields as low as 1 ton per hectare to 15 tons per hectare. What depends on the climate or weather. It also depends on management. So the range is, as I told you, much higher than for crops. And usually the reason is that we keep the permanent grasslands on much less fertile soils than the crops are. In this picture, you can see one granny which bear big pile of hay, and this is a picture from Ukraine at about 20 years old. And I just like to mention that some people in our country have the permanent grassland just because they have a subsidy or it's not allowed to plow it to arable land. But in some countries, the permanent grasslands still provide the main source of income, as you can see in this picture, even without any subsidies. And it was the standard in the period 60, 70 years ago. Okay, so after the forage production, the next very important ecosystem service is the climate regulation. In the graph on the left side, you can see the picture from Pete Smith, who presented in his paper 8 years ago. And you can see that after grassing of arable land, there is increase of organic carbon in the soil, and the equilibrium is reached after 40, sometimes after 100 years after grass establishment. So it's quite a long process. And if we make the renovation very frequently, we lose the potential of the carbon sequestration in the soil. On the right side, you can see that sometimes it can be a problem that even when we keep the same management, in dry years, you can lose the organic carbon in the soil on the grasslands. What is the problem, especially in the future scenario of climate change? I mentioned already the greenhouse gases production. You can see the main three gases, the methane and nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide. All of them are produced also by grasslands, but especially the methane is connected or linked with the ruminants rearing. And I would like to say that generally the greenhouse gas production should be negative. It means that they can store more greenhouse gases than they emitted. So the public generally thinks that the cows are enemy for us because they produce the methane, but without grasslands we would have much higher production of greenhouse gases. So I think that in this case the reputation of grassland should be good. Grasslands are known also as a very good protection of soil against erosion and also good prevention to flooding. You can see two pictures from our country. In the left picture, you can see the flooding in one village or small town north to Brno, when the permanent grasslands were plowed down 20 years ago and were replaced by silage maize, what is quite common. And you can see the big flash flood, which caused huge damage in the village. On the right side, you can see a typical picture from the silage maize, which is very popular forage, but its cultivation is connected with many problems, environmental problems, especially with erosion, as you can see here. Here, another pictures with erosion. On the left side, again, the big fields with silage maize, and the buffer strip below the field, which is covered by grass, was able to trap the soil and the sediments and prevent the problems in the surface waters later. And on the right side, you can see also the troubles with grasslands if you use the renovation, because grasslands are a very good tool for decreasing risk of flooding and erosion, but it's not true a few weeks or months after renovation or seeding of the new sward. Concerning biodiversity, I mentioned already that biodiversity is exceptionally high in many grasslands, permanent grasslands, and especially in Europe is the most biodiverse ecosystem we have. But sometimes, especially in protected area, the farmers are forced to don't use any fertilizer, but it's not always the best way to keep or increase biodiversity, because especially if you have depleted soils without nutrients, they are not able to provide a very good environment for high biodiversity. So in this picture from Science, I think, from the journal Science, you can see that the highest biodiversity is formed in the situation where there is the moderate biomass production. It means also the nutrient stock in the soil. Not depleted soils are the best for the biodiversity. It's the same here. That's the picture from one flowerage meadow on the left side, and on the right side you can see that very good indicator for biodiversity is also the stock or reserves of phosphorus, available phosphorus in the soil. So if we have very high reserves of available phosphorus in the soil, the diversity is usually low because there are few aggressive species which suppress the diversity. But on the left side of the graph, you can see that even if you have very low concentration of phosphorus, is not very good for biodiversity. The biodiversity for farmers is not always perfect, because you should know what species are present in the grasslands, and in some cases you can see that some herbs or forbs can be very dangerous or toxic plants for animals, and especially in last 10-20 years we can find many similar pictures in our grasslands with sometimes nice plants, as you can see on the right side, but they are very, very toxic. And concerning recreation and culture value, on the right side you can see attractive landscape for tourists. On the left side, you can see there's a picture from Austria. That's some seminar outside, which is visited by many farmers and students, but also by cows, you can see. So it's a good source for, or important source of inspiration for us. And I'm going to the end. So I was speaking about the positive externalities mainly, and ecosystem services, which are very valuable for us. There are some synergies, so some ecosystem services are going together, and for example, biodiversity and recreation value is going very well together. But there are some antagonism, so it means usually forage production, if we increase forage production, we decrease the level of other ecosystem services. So it's not always easy to find the best way how to manage your grasslands to keep good forage production and also good level of some ecosystem services. And the last slide is just to conclude what I said. So very important is that the grassland should be managed well. And if they are managed well, they provide multiple ecosystem services. The number one, food production, but also it regulates water flow. Water purification is important for potable water production. It protects biodiversity, sequestrate very high amount of carbon in the soil, and they have high recreation value if they are managed well. The best way how to manage permanent grassland is to use moderate intensity of management. If we use incorrect management, it means fertilizing, too frequent renovation, or some other problematic management practices, we threaten the delivery of ecosystem services. So the farmers can change the ecosystem services very much. And the well-designed permanent grassland management systems should minimize the frequency of spore renovation and maximize ecosystem services. So it's quite a common problem that many farmers are used to plow down the grassland after 6-7 years to establish the new ecosystem services, but they damage many ecosystem services they were established. So I think by good management, we should prolong the duration of permanent grassland in our agricultural systems. So thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you, Stanislav. I think that it was also very interesting presentation, and you pay attention for many different problems. Exactly, it is difficult to say. It is very difficult to say what is the proper and good management, what is the bad management. Depends on the point of view. But I think it's also good subject for discussion, for questions. So during the coffee break and after the coffee break, I'd like to ask all participants to ask the question, to put some remarks on chat, or to join discussion, because one of the goals of webinar, it is not exactly to present some opinions from different experts from different countries, but also to discuss about different problems with different group of people. So please, during coffee break, you should think about question and remarks. But now we have a lot of different information, and thank you also for keeping time. And it is time for the break and time for coffee, time for the short rest, but please come back after 15 minutes. We start 25 to 12, and the next presentation after the break will be given by Jouke Oenema from Netherlands, but also I would like to ask Professor Andrezj Borusiewicz and Hein Korevaar for leading discussion after the break and for pay attention for different opinion from different group of people.
Yeah.
At this moment, I think it's time for less.
One minute.
Yes.
I write on the chat if somebody have a question.
Yes, I know.
Write your question. We will answer in panel discussion. We try to answer. Yeah. If somebody have a question, so it's good if you write the question on the chat. Sorry.
Exactly. I also ask about that kind of effort. And now I think it's time for short rest. So thank you for the presentation. Very good presentation. Thank you for keeping time. And please, we will meet after 15 minutes. Thank you for your attention and come back, please. I think it's almost time. I see Jouke is ready. I hope all participants also ready. And of course, we can wait a little bit, but time is probably running. So I think it's necessary to obtain and to keep the time and to keep the order in our discussion and in our seminar. So maybe we can start our meeting after the break, and first after coffee first speaker will be our best friend Jouke Oenema from Wageningen University. The funny thing is that Wageningen University and Warsaw University have exactly the same short name. In the past, Wageningen Agricultural University or Warsaw Agricultural University. At this moment, Wageningen University of Life Sciences, Warsaw University of Life Sciences. So, Jouke, the screen is yours. And I am very happy that you are able to be here and to join with us your knowledge about management on the lowland peatlands. So we can start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for the invitation to give here a presentation. You can see my screen. Hopefully it's working.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, thank you. I will tell you something about the situation of peatland and dairy farming in the Netherlands. First, I will start briefly and very general to tell you something about the peatland areas in Europe and the Netherlands, following with some history and characteristics of peatlands in the Netherlands. Then I will focus on 2 examples of dairy farming on peatland in the Netherlands. Ongoing, I will tell you something about threats and challenges of peatlands, and finally I draw some conclusions. Well, here on the right you see a map of Europe. Oh wait, I changed my a map of Europe with indicated the peat area in Europe and with colors. What you can see is in Wales and uplands peatland in Wales and Scotland, but also in Finland and Sweden, but that's only woodland peatland. Well, and then the lowlands is also told already is also a lot of areas in Poland, but as you see also in the Netherlands. Well, here is a map of the Netherlands, and the peat area is indicated in the red ellipses and also in the green color. So major we have 2 areas in the northern part of the Netherlands, but also a huge area in the western part of the Netherlands. And well, on this photo on the right side, you see a kind of impression of the peatland area in the Netherlands. Well, with the small fields, what was also told you by the director of the National Park in Poland, and the small fields with a lot of ditches between. And on top you see the small villages, and I will come back to that later. First, some history. Well, if you can see, well, the first systematic cultivations, or you can say exploitation of peatland in the Netherlands, started after the 12th century. And after the Middle Age, there were 3 main activities. First one is actually the peat cutting, and that is used the fuel for people, mostly in the cities. Then we have a lot of windmills for better controlling or managing the water levels. And that's why there is a lot of grasslands. So it's dominated with permanent grasslands, and the main activity on this permanent grassland is dairy farming. Well, then from the 20th century, more pressure from urbanization and mechanization on peatland, and there was a higher production, increasing fertilizer use, producing more food, especially with milk and cheese. And all this was possible because of the lower water level in ditches. Well, then from 1980s and onwards, and still ongoing, there's an increasing awareness of the problems with current agriculture systems. On one hand, there is the soil subsidence and increasing a lot of environmental problems. And on the other hand, there were some competing claims. Well, it's a kind of change from ecosystem services from productivity to more wishes for biodiversity but also water quality. What makes the peatland in the Netherlands so special? And here on the slide you see some characteristics of peatland. First, it's a very cultural and historical value with the landscape and the buildings. There is an open landscape with a lot of ditches, large views, small fields and water lakes. And the land is dominated with a permanent grassland and mainly used for productivity. But there's also a lot of nature and biodiversity values on this peatland and grassland. We have the typical peatland nature with meadow birds and all grassland types. Well, also as Stanislav also told me, there was also fields of grassland for more than 100 years, and a nice flora. Other area is the bog area with typical vegetations, with reed and sedge patches and rare bird species. Characteristics is also the typical infrastructure with bridges, small roads and small ferries. Well, and then we have the so-called ribbon villages. These are narrow, long villages along channels and roads. I will come back to that later. And here is already some, you can see here on the left top, and the pressure of that kind of a ribbon village. It's a long, it follows the nature shape in the landscape. In the middle, you see two pictures on top and in the bottom, the surplus of water in this area. And then on the right side, on the top, well, it's very typical in this area, a lot of windmills used for controlling and managing the water levels, especially, of course, in the past, but nowadays it's more done with other artificial systems, of course. Left under, here's a photo picture of the nice city of Gouda with the typical channel and bridges. And here on the right, you see a picture. What you can see that the effect of soil subsidence, and you can see with the street and also with the crooked doors caused by the soil subsidence. More pictures of the typical landscape with on the left top is our national bird. It's the black-tailed godwit. This area, peat area, is very important for this bird, and it's also a very rare bird species. Left under, a rare species of butterflies. It's the small pearl bordered fritillary, and then some species of nice plant species, or like the cotton grass, the marsh gentian, and here right is one of my favorite is the flowering rush. Well, I now so far some general impressions of the peatland area in the Netherlands, and I will continue now with more focus on some characteristics of the permanent grassland. And this is a list of common species in grassland, was mostly used for intensive dairy farming. Well, on average, you can say 70 till 90% of the fields is common, is productive species with the perennial ryegrass and the timothy. And examples of less productive species or herbs are a meadow, a foxtail, couch grass, and two species of meadowgrass, the rough meadowgrass or the annual meadowgrass, and also there's a broad-leaved duck species, and of course the famous dandelion. As I said before, dairy farming is the major activity on peatland, and I will give you now some results of two dairy farms. These two dairy farms are pilot commercial farms, and they are a member of the project Cows and Opportunity. You see here the logo. Well, Cows and Opportunity is a project, is already started in 1999. And the main task of this project is to demonstrate best practices and to develop and implement innovations. But also a major part of the project is also the results of these farms, and the data are used for improvements of the Dutch environmental regulations. And here you on the left, you see the farmer De Vries, and he is located well, both farms are lying in the western peatland, and he is living in the city of Stolwijk. And here on the right hand, it's a picture of the farmer Hagort, and he's living in the city of Waarder. Here are some general characteristics of these two farms. This is situation in the year 2020. And as you can see, farmer De Vries has only a permanent grassland, 50 hectares of permanent grassland. Farmer De Vries has also a share of maize land. But this maize land from him is not on his farm, it's on a distance, and it's cultivated on clay soil, because maize and peatland is not, it's not a good way of management. Number of cows, both above 100 cows, and the number of young stocks is expressed as the number of 10 cows, and you see it's very low number, especially at farmer Hejduk. So they do a kind of outsourcing the young stock. So they're selling the young calves, and they're buying pregnant heifers back on the farm. The stocking rate is above 2. Farmer Hejduk is 2.4, and the Vries is 2.1. The milk production is per hectare is around 20,000 liters per hectare, so very intensive. The milk production per cow at farmer Hejduk is 8,200, and at farmer the Vries is 9,200 per cow. They graze more than 200 days per year. But you have to keep in mind that that's only day grazing. So during the night, the cows are inside. Here are some figures and data from the water levels and soil fertility. The water level in ditches. During the winter time, the water level in the ditches is between 0 and 20 centimeters below surface level, and during the summer it's around 20 till 40 centimeters below surface level. And in this table there are some soil properties. As you can see, the organic matter content at farmer De Vries is higher than at Hejduk. And the opposite is De Vries. De Vries is the clay content is lower, and at farmer Hejduk is a little bit higher. Well, this is partly driven by the different origin of the peat. At farmer De Vries is mesotrophic peat from reeds and sedges, and at farmer Hejduk is eutrophic peat, and it's from woods and meadows. As you can see, the pH, it's a pH measured in water solutions, and here is the target values in this column. And at farmer De Vries is between 5 and 6, and at farmer Hejduk somewhat lower. Extractable P is expressed as P2O5 per 100 gram of soil. And this extraction is well, as you can compare it with the Bray P extraction. And at farmer De Vries is higher than at Hejduk, and some fields at farmer Hejduk is below the target level. And the figures of potassium and magnesium are very high, especially from potassium, and it's above the target level. Well, I will now continue with some inputs to grassland, the fertilization. And here you see a graph from left from De Vries and Hejduk, and the numbers in the years 2010 to 2020. And you can see is that the amount of applied manure is around 200 kilograms of total N on both farms. And addition, there is among between 50 and 100 grams of mineral fertilizer applied. And the calculated excreta during grazing is between 25 and 75. And to have an impression of these inputs, we have in the Netherlands regulations. The amount of nutrients is limited. There are some application standards, and these amounts is in line of our standards. Mostly the inputs is lower than what is allowed on peatland. Here is some figures of the dry matter yields of grassland is total dry matter yields, as well as the amount of yields what is harvested, but also the amount what is grazed during the intake during grazing. The latter is calculated and is based on the energy needs of the whole dairy cattle, so as well as the cows or the young stock. And you can see on average, it's about 10 tons of dry matter within these 10 years, but there is a substantial variation between years. You see low in a year for 2013 and also in 2018. And 2014 is known as very growing, best growing seasons, whereas above average yields. Well, the inputs to grassland and the outputs resulted also in we called it a soil service surplus. And above the inputs of manure and fertilizers, we also taking into account the atmospheric depositions, but also the end fixations by clover. Is in the input and outputs, as I said before, is the net yields, as well from the harvested as during grazing. Here on the left side, you see a slide of the nitrogen surplus. Well, but within these 10 years, that it ranges between 0 and 150 kilogram of nitrogen per hectare, and of course substantial variations between years. High surpluses in 2013 and low in 2014. Here on the right side is the P surplus. Well, actually, there's a mistake. It should be P2O5 surplus instead of the P surplus. And also with nitrogen, you see high surpluses in dry years and low, relatively low in good growing conditions. But on average, it's the P surplus is around 0 on these two farms. Also, the water quality is monitored on these two farms, because these two farms are part of our it's a group of farmers who for evaluating the environmental regulations in the Netherlands. So on these farms, the water quality is measured, as well in groundwater and also in surface water. And here are the figures of the groundwater quality. Here on the x-axis is the years, also again almost 10 years, and on the left is the nitrogen concentrations in the groundwater. The nitrate of the nitrogen concentrations with nitrate is the blue color. The red color is with ammonium, and also the organic fraction in the groundwater. I have to say this is organic nitrogen in solution. As you can see, that there is, and in Europe we have only a limit for the nitrate concentrations in groundwater, and that is shown here with the blue line. It's around 11 N nitrate in the groundwater, and you see on peat soil there is hardly nitrate in the groundwater, but there are substantial high levels of ammonium, but also of organic. And high levels of ammonium is also because of the soil degradation, causes also high values of ammonium. Then we go to surface water, and the limit for surface water for the European limit is expressed as the total nitrogen, and as you can see, the level is very stricter than in groundwater. the limit is for total nitrogen is around above 2 N milligram per liter of water. And you can see on both farms, the levels of total N is higher, mostly higher than as the limit. But the major part of is organic nitrogen. So far, the results of management on these two farms, and I will now continue with some threats on peatland. Well, and the major threat on peatland is actually a soil subsidence. It's calculated that on average it's almost 1 centimeter per year. And the soil subsidence is caused by peat degradation and is caused also high greenhouse gas emissions with CO2 and also N2O. The soil subsidence causes a lot of problems with the infrastructures like roads and buildings. And as you see here on the right picture, you see an example of the problems with infrastructure. This is a shelter, was built in 1940 as part of defense systems in the Second World War. And as you can see now, the piles is already after 70 to 80 years is visible. Another example here is on the left photo. Is example of the city of Gouda again. Here on the left side are old houses. They are built on wooden piles. And here on the right side are new or relatively new buildings. And you can see this, the level is higher, so they have to build an extra step up here in the middle of the street. Well, now I will continue with some challenges on peatland and by controlling the water level, and one is using systems with the submerged drains. Well, and in this figure you can see these drains, and this is a ditch, and here is a ditch, and here in the middle is the field. And as you can see, these drains are situated below the water level in the ditches. And here in the middle, you see the shape of the water level between the two ditches. So the dotted lines are the situations without drains. So the blue line is the dotted line is the situations during the winter. And the red line, dotted line, is situations in the summer. And the effect of using these submerged drains is that the water levels between ditches are kind of dimmed. And that is as well is good for the farmers, for the productivity. So they can manage better as well as in winter, but also during the summer, the fields. But it's also good for to decrease the soil subsidence. And I will show you this in this figure. A few years long, they measured the soil subsidence. And here in the blue line is a field with the reference, and the red line is a field with the submerged drains. So they started in 2004 with measurements. So that's why then is the soil subsidence is 0. And then after a few years, so there is a difference between the soil subsidence between the reference and the drains. Well, I have to say, as you can see, especially caused only in 1 year, in 2007. There was a huge soil subsidence in the reference and less in the field with the drains. But still, it gives an indication. Another challenge is reducing greenhouse gas emissions on peatland and in relation of the impact of the water management. They did an experiment and they measured for a period of 3 years, they measured the field level greenhouse gas emissions of 3 different management types. So here on the right side is a system with a low water level, and as well, you can say as same as the examples of the dairy farms, with an intensive management. For example, four times cutting the fields, and 3 or 4 times also with fertilization. Here in the middle is an example of a fields with a dynamic water level and with extensive management, especially for good management for meadowbirds. And this is with a dynamic water level system, so very high during the winter. So the whole area is kind of wet, and very low water level in ditches during the summer. And here on the left is situations what is a nature area. And what was surprising is that there was, and the blue is this CO2 emissions, and the yellow is the methane emissions, and the red one is the N2O emissions. Here is expressed as the ton of CO2 equivalents per hectare. And what you can see is there is hardly difference between the two management situations with water level controlling. This is because the peat degradations is mostly caused during the summer period. And there was hardly difference between the excess management and the intensive management during the summer. And that's why there is a substantial CO2 emissions caused by the soil degradation. And also was surprising, that was a kind of carbon sink in the nature area, but there was also a high levels of methane emissions because of the anaerobic situation. But in net, there is a kind of so there are some challenges on peatland in the Netherlands to decrease the carbon of the greenhouse gas emissions, but then we have to decide what kind of management we want to have. Finally, some conclusions. Well, as I said before, high productive dairy farming on peatlands and permanent grassland, well, it's possible. And the ryegrass is the dominant species on this permanent grassland. Well, as you see, the productive systems dairy farming is possible, but there are causes also soil subsidence and high greenhouse gas emissions. Challenges is the installing of submerged drains on peatland. Well, it has a positive effect on grass production, and may reduce soil subsidence and greenhouse gas emissions. And in general, peat, permanent grass on the lowlands is potential for high landscapes values, cultural values, but also for biodiversity values. So far, my presentation, I will give back the floor to the chairman.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I would like to give the chair to Andrezj Borusiewicz now. Please, Andrezj, it is your turn to be a leader of our discussion and the end of the session before the next coffee break. So, Andrezj.
Thank you so much, Piotr. I would like to first thank you for the presentation and interesting lecture. We are all able to importance of soil production of the high quality forage from the grassland, because we know how is the fodder important. I am from the milk area where we have similar problems with the fodder, and as well we try to care about environmental. So the next lecture is Piotr Marczakiewicz from Biebrzański Park Narodowy, from Biebrza National Park. So Piotr, now is your turn. So
good afternoon. Dzień dobry wszystkim. Słychać mnie?
Hello everyone. Can you hear me well? My presentation will be in English. I hope that's not a problem, especially as I know that part of our participants here are actually joining us from Poland.
Czy widać?
Can you see the presentation well? Yes, you're very well heard, and we see your presentation. So the topic of my presentation is the richness of the fauna of Biebrza National Park, especially focusing on birds, on the fauna. Perhaps I will repeat some of the points made by our director. However, I will try to do it from a slightly different angle. So some special characteristics of the Biebrza Valley, let me take a look at on those. This is a very large valley of a river, and in fact it's a fairly undisturbed one, undisturbed river peatland valley. It really has this very natural character of this river. It has a lot of oxbows, a lot of meanders, creating the yearly large flooding. Obviously, that depends on the amount of snow that falls every winter. What we also have here, and what's also very characteristic of this part of the world, is large peat deposit, because this part is very, very flat, and it has a significant amount of peat. There is lots of it, really. Another important element of this area is that in the past it was extensively used, in fact, as a whole. Currently, we're trying to maintain it in this relatively extensive way. All that leads to a situation in which, in the Biebrza Valley, we have a lot of different habitats, a huge variety, huge diversity of habitats. We have those mineral parts, which add to this mosaic of different habitats, very unique habitats indeed, especially because of those wetland areas, which are quite unique in this part of Europe, because most of those habitats have been deprived of this wetland character due to urbanization, mostly, obviously. And then obviously the fact that it's a large area, that this valley is really large. So the fact that those habitats are unique, but there's also a lot of them. This all creates a situation in which we have a high number of different endangered and rare species. Not only they are there, but in fact there are a lot of individuals of those species. So let's start with mammals, perhaps. In the Biebrza Valley, we have 5 species of mammals that are listed in Annex 2 of the EU Habitat Directive. And they have a relatively large population, and this is why they have been covered by this directive. So here we have 2 species of bats, so Western Barbastel and pond bat, as well as European beaver, which gave the name to the national park, as we've already mentioned, and Eurasian otter, as well as wolf. However, perhaps the most characteristic species is, in fact, a species outside of this list, which is the elk. Here in the Biebrza Valley, it has survived. It survived the Second World War. In other parts of Poland at that time, it didn't. However, it did survive the Second World War in this part of Poland, and nowadays is being protected, and it has spread almost in the whole of Poland. And there are more individuals, in fact, in Poland in its entirety. It's a sort of attraction, a touristic attraction, in fact, in the national park. Let's turn to beaver. I've mentioned it already. It is estimated, because it's very difficult to count them very specifically, but it is estimated that there are around 600 to maybe 650 individuals in the Biebrza Valley. And again, it's not a very rare species in Poland, because it has been protected at some point. Nevertheless, the Biebrza Valley is an important area where there are a lot of them, and it doesn't cause problems in the park, because even if it does cause some problems, if it cuts some trees, we don't treat it as a parasite, as it might be treated in some other parts of Poland. The wolf, again, difficult to estimate the number of individuals, because they migrate outside of the valley, outside of the park. So sometimes there are, the numbers vary. Sometimes there are fewer of them. Sometimes there are more. At this stage, we estimate that there are around between 13 and 25 individuals. Again, there are situations in which in winter, it seems there are more of them. We can spot them with more frequency. We even saw a family of 18 individuals, which is a significant, a large family. Biebrza Valley is, in fact, an important ecological corridor for wolf migration, but not only for wolf migration, also for lynx, for example. Maybe also for some other species that need wetlands to prosper. Lynx is perhaps a rarer species. At this stage, we are aware of 6 individuals, but we've seen mothers with cubs. Let's move to birds. Ladies and gentlemen, Biebrza is especially well known for its ornithofauna. And let me just say that until recently, we've observed 304 species, including almost 200 of those who actually nest in the Biebrza Valley. The Biebrza Valley plays a double role in a way. It is a stopover for migratory birds, but also it is a place where birds do stay and they nest and they have and there are new generations of birds born here. So some of those birds simply need those wetlands that are so characteristic of the Biebrza Valley. Sometimes also the number of birds depends on the amount of snow as well, which I've already mentioned. It's also important for birds, not only for mammals. Waterfowl, again, very important. Ducks, geese, but also waders. Including including those birds that you can see here.
Prawdopodobnie też dlatego trafił, że był, że tak powiem, wolnym gatunkiem, ponieważ łoś i bóbr już były zajęte przez inne parki narodowe i dlatego.
So this is the bird, in fact, that we have as our symbol, in our logo of the national park. Now it doesn't nest very often in the park. It used to, though. These were the migratory birds. Let's move on to the birds that actually nest, and let's start with the aquatic warbler. Well, maybe it's not very spectacular in terms of its aesthetics, its looks. It used to be just considered, again, not a very spectacular bird. However, it is very important for the Biebrza National Park. It nests in huge numbers in the park here. What's especially significant is that the Biebrza Valley is one of the rare parts of Poland where this bird does nest. In the Biebrza Valley, we have around 1/4 of all the birds of the world, so of the whole of the world population, and 80% of the Polish population of the bird.
I to jest właśnie, dlatego jest to gatunek flagowy nasz.
This is our flagship species in a way, the most important in my opinion, because we don't have, I don't think we have any other animal or plant that we would have in those numbers, 1/4 of world population. If we closed it down, the Biebrza Valley, for the bird, probably it would cause the extinction of the species on a global scale. Another species that is in a way a flagship species for the Biebrza Valley is the great spotted eagle, endangered globally as well. Not a lot of those in Biebrza, around 10 pairs, conspecific, but also mixed. However, again, it's very important for Biebrza as well, because this is in fact the only place in Poland where those eagles nest, and the most eastern part of Europe where those birds do nest. The most western part of the world where those birds do nest. We don't have those in Western Europe. Some other species where Poland is an important part of their habitats. So, for example, great snipe, around 50% of the Polish population, around 155 to 186 males, because in this species we only count males. It's too difficult to estimate the number of females or pairs. Another species is the curlew, 15% of the Polish population. It's as you can see, it's not a huge population, 27 to 29 pairs, but it's still 15% of the whole population. So it's one of those. It's one of those species that doesn't have very significant populations, at least in Poland. I would also like to say that I'm mostly speaking about the Biebrza Valley, but obviously birds don't really pay attention to national borders. So we mostly count individuals over geographical regions. And very often most of the population of that bird actually can be located outside of the borders of the national park of Biebrza. Another bird worth mentioning is the spotted crake and common red shonk. 10% and 23% of Polish population respectively. In Poland, common red shonk has decreased its population recently. What has also been mentioned, and I will repeat that, the most important and ornithological point of view in Biebrza National Park are the wet grassland ecosystems, not forests, but those open grasslands. And this is where we have the most precious of our species. And those are the ones that are also used by the migratory birds. As was also mentioned before, these are the habitats that are semi-natural. So partly created by man, but they have this very important natural component. And in fact, this human element is important, because if humans stopped working there and managing those areas, actually, if these areas were abandoned by people, we would see, for example, encroachment of trees such as willow or birch or reeds as well. And that would obviously be detrimental to those grasslands. Here you can see an area in one of our largest open marshes. This is where we have one of our most important birds, which is aquatic warbler, and also some other species. So you can see the aquatic warbler, the great snipe, curlew, but also the eagle that I've mentioned before. Even though actually the curlew, the eagle lives mostly in the forests, but it does need those open grasslands for finding food. However, if we stop any action on those areas, on those grasslands, we will see this succession of, first of all, we're going to have reed encroachment. The number of bird species is going to decrease, and there's going to be, we will see some other species appearing. However, they will be less rare. There will be more common in other areas, such as, for example, sedge warbler, willow warbler, or water rail. Again, important birds, nevertheless not that rare and not that uncommon. Those species are not endangered. We will find them in other parts of Poland, in other parts of the world, and those are the species that will be replaced. This is going to be more of a loss, because they will have difficulty finding habitats in other parts of Poland or other parts of the world, maybe in Belarus, in Ukraine, but again, for example, habitats of aquatic warbler, we don't have habitats of this species that wouldn't depend in some way on human activity. This bird does in fact need human activity for survival. So this is what you can see here is a poster that was developed as part of a project developed in Lithuania. This is also this umbrella species, aquatic warbler. Umbrella species are species that are relatively easy to protect. It's easy to get funding for them. However, it doesn't mean that we're just focusing on one species. Someone might say there are so many other species worth protecting. What is happening here, in fact, is that we're protecting one habitat that is a habitat important for other species as well. So by protecting this one particular species, we're also protecting other species, which are also important. And that's why it's called an umbrella species from this point of view. That's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you, Piotr, for your lecture. We know you are passionate about nature. We appreciate the value of the flora and fauna of the Biebrza National Park. There is a large population of unique birds in the Biebrza Park. Currently, there is already a period when you can observe the birds present. So it's a good time to go to the Biebrza Park. I hope that in the future, conference participants will be able to experience this life, so we can see in the future this unique population of birds, I think. So now we start the discussion. We have already asked the question. We have 9 questions on the chat, so maybe somebody write another question. So I would like to ask Hein Korevaar to moderate this part. So Hein, can you?
Yes, hello, everybody. We come now to the discussion, and I have to prepare things. I go to share a slide.
Yeah. Okay, we see the slides.
Yes.
Fine, yeah.
Yes. And I have written down already some of the questions you put in the question and answer box or the chat box. Let's start my part saying again that it's a pity that we, due to the terrifying circumstances in Ukraine and its consequences for Poland, we had to decide not to gather in Poland. For us, it means that we missed the visit to the unique Biebrza National Park, with its vast area of wetlands, permanent grassland, floristic value and bird populations. However, thanks to the nice presentations by Artur and Piotr, we have got this morning a good impression of the park and its beauty and value. I was lucky myself to visit the national park already 25 years ago during a grassland meeting. I will show you a few pictures from that visit. First, an overview of the park and the river Biebrza with its wetlands and grasslands in May 1997. The second picture, and this picture is not so nice as the pictures Piotr and Artur showed us, is about the biodiversity in the park. This is a butterfly with the nice English name Queen of Spain, Fertility. Today, we are not together in the one room. That will make the interaction and discussion between all participants a bit more complicated and indirect. You, as already said, may type your questions in the question and answer box, and Andrezj and I will pick them up, read them, and give then the floor to one of the speakers. So we have got already at the moment 9 questions.
Now is 11, so
now 11. I go now to
I set on the chart.
Yes, but I changed a bit. I see now not my the questions. I see only my presentation.
Yeah.
What have I done wrong?
But the question we have on the chart, so you
yes.
can use it.
Yes. The first question was sent by Richard or Roscoe, and maybe it is one of the important for the Biebrza National Park. What happens with the grass when it is mown? Have you any experience with producing, for instance, biogas from the grass or other high-value products? Artur, you already showed us a bit of the experiments, but in general, what is at the moment done with the grass now?
Well, as you all know, from both for formal point of view and also from nature protection point of view, the grass mown has to be taken out. It is necessary not to change the structure, fertility of the peatland or grassland. So all the grass which is mown, all the biomass supposed to be taken off the field. And of course, throughout the time with the climate change, in the past it was rather easy because the winter in Biebrza or in this part of Poland was a proper one. That means snow and freeze. Now, with the time passing by and the climate change results, it's hardly to predict sometimes what the winter will be like, and therefore activities related with winter, which means easy time to go on the grassland, on wetlands, on peatlands, to pick up the grass, the biomass. Well, in general, all the biomass must be taken out of the field, and we are challenging year after year that this task sometimes is very difficult due to natural conditions. But of course, this is our problem, how to solve it. But it doesn't help in general. It doesn't help with the whole process and with the whole activity. And what are we doing with the biomass? As I said, when it's dry, it could still be used on the farm, mainly as a bedding, sometimes as for food for cows, horses. But also we are looking for another methods to utilize the biomass. And of course, such ideas as biomass, biofuel, other forms. It's still ongoing discussion, and some measures have been taken out to go with this issue. What to do with this huge amount of biomass and how to successfully and how to effectively make a use of it.
Thank you very much, Artur. Dina, I have a problem with maybe what can you see from I see only my own presentation.
Yes.
And I see not the other speakers.
Okay, so Piotr Marczakiewicz is raising his hand.
Yeah, Piotr is raising hand.
Yes, can I say something?
Yes.
Just to answer this question, we don't have any experience with biochar and not even many information, just some websites, and I didn't find any example of practical use of this biochar or producing it on bigger scale. So we didn't do anything with this part, and no idea what we could do. We have some tries with biogas, but it's still on a very early stage. Okay.
Now we have Piotr Stypinsky.
Yes, I think it was a very good question, because it's exactly a big problem. According to our law, it's necessary to remove biomass from the grassland. So the director is absolutely right. But it is a kind of the problem in technical point of view, because usually it's a very wet area and it is not such easy to transport that material. Also, the quality of this material is rather low. So farmers don't like use this material for feeding, for example, dairy cows. But we have some experience with horses, especially with primitive horses. And I think it's one of idea to offer hay from this land to horses, especially during the winter. But generally, I think it was a good question that is still one of the big problem in the national parks, not only in Biebrza, but how is possible to join farming point of view and nature conservation. And I agree that maybe future is in gas fermentation, but it is also a problem, as I said, with infrastructure and transport of this biomass from the swamps to place where it's possible to make some extra products, some products, for example, for energy use. So thank you for the question again, because it's one of the big problems, and I think that those discussions maybe help us to find the proper solution. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Piotr and Artur and others for your remarks and questions. Another very important question is, what are the factors? It's a question from Maria Janiki. What factors are of the greatest negative impact on the bird population in the Biebrza National Park? Piotr, can you answer it? Piotr Marinsky.
Yes. Well, it's a very complex question.
Yes.
And difficult to answer like this. But I think two problems are: it's a water level, so drainage of these sites.
Yes.
Because also because of climate changes, not only because of drainage mechanical. And the second one is this plant succession. So encroachment of bushes and trees on those open habitats, non-forest. There's two main problems.
Yeah, water and management.
Yeah. Yes.
And what the other question connected to this, what are the main risks for preserving the Biebrza National Park in general, from then not only water, but also climate change, politics, and so on? What are then the main risks of preserving the value of the national park in its in general?
Maybe politics is very important because it's mean money.
Yes.
We need money for protection, for those management, and we are now lucky to be in European Union, and most of money we use to this management is money of agro-environmental climatic schemes. So these are money for agriculture, not nature protection. There is very little money for nature protection. And yes, politics is very important. I hope this level of...
And the farmers, they get money from the environmental schemes. Is that enough money for them?
No.
To maintain the...
Okay. It's another problem with management. It's the changes in agriculture, so intensification. All our habitats are human-made, all those open habitats, but it was not non-intensive agriculture. So one mowing a year, and hand mowing, and no one is interested in anymore. So it is or abandoned land or with intensive production, and it's both not good for biodiversity. And farmers are not very interested in this non-intensive agriculture, because this intensive is what they can earn money. We have these agro-environmental schemes, but the amount of payment is still the same, roughly the same like it was when it started. It was, I think, 15 years ago. So now there is not many farmers which are interested on their land, because it is used, but on land of Biebrza National Park, which is leased or by us, but only because we don't allow another management, only this non-intensive, and it's proper for these agro-environmental schemes. But on private land outside Biebrza National Park, it's very rare for farmers to use it, because they are interested in very intensive agriculture.
Yeah. And Artur, you told us this morning that you are trying to make agreements with private persons, farmers, I think, companies, and also non-governmental organizations for long-term leasing programs. So to make agreements with them for proper management, I guess. Can you explain more about the interest by farmers to join these agreements and programs?
This is one of the very successful and very sufficient mechanism of active nature protection, which is adopted on grasslands, so these wet meadows in the Biebrza National Park, and it's based, of course, on the agro-environmental scheme payment. So the land which is owned by the park is leased to those outsourcing operators, let's say. And it works more or less similar to what public tender is. So every year we organize such a public tender, let's call it, and different interested organizations, persons, they can take a part in this whole process. And then, of course, it's based on different conditions, and whoever offer best conditions, then we sign the contract with the partner for 5 years, and then it's both. Within the contract, we are sure that nature protection activities and nature protection goals are presented there in the paper. And of course, the other important part is also the financial part of it. So the national park gets some payment for leasing, of course.
Okay.
And it is all based, I mean, majority of this mechanism is based on agro-environmental scheme, because those organizations or those bodies who signed the contract with the park, of course, they apply for the financial support from the agro-environmental schemes. So as far as the agro-environmental schemes program will exist, we can say that somehow nature activities, they will be carried out. It's a question mark, of course, what is going to happen after, when, let's say, someone decides that no agro-environmental schemes will be offered to the farmers.
Yeah. Andrezj, a bit broader, outside the park, in your region, or maybe also in whole Poland, what is then the situation, the interest in agri-environmental schemes?
In our region, we have high milk production, so the different view of the grass, yeah, because the farmers thinking just about the intensive production. So they're more interesting about just only a high production of milk with the best quality, because we have here 3 dairy big companies. But I think they have to think about the environmental and as well about this special region like National Park Biebrza or Narwiański National Park as well. So I think we have to do a lot in this way.
Yeah. And Stanislav, in the Czech Republic, how's then the situation? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Okay, so in our country, usually farmers are not very happy. They are in protected area from the same reason. So the forage production and the quality is limited. If there is enough rain, so enough production from other grasslands, they are usually happy with the money from agro-envy schemes, because they have additional money and they have good production from other areas. But especially in the 2018, which was the third dry year in the line, they had big troubles because they depleted the reserves from previous years, and the money from the protected area were not enough for buying new hay for feeding of their cattle. So especially in dry years, the conflicts are arising in much higher intensity than in standard years.
Yes. And Jouke, in the Netherlands, can you explain what's the situation there concerning agri-environmental schemes?
Well, I think the problems, what is also mentioned in Poland and in Czech, is also, of course, in the Netherlands. But I think in the Netherlands it started already much earlier. But of course, farmers has also they get some money from from schemes. But in common, there is the movements. Why are farmers so intensive? Is because of the problem of business models. They have to earn money, and due to the high prices of land, of ownerships, but also from rentals, but also prices of buildings, prices of labor, and prices of machines. They have to have a kind of number of animals on this land to produce a certain amount of milk and meat. So, well, that is of course always the movement in the Netherlands in the past, but I think it's still actual. The same problems is also nowadays. But then, of course, there's still the pressure of other regulations, but society and other wishes. So yeah.
Hey, another question for you, Jouke, was from Willy Kessler concerning how much of the 20,000 kilograms of milk per hectare you told us for these 2 farms is produced from that permanent grassland, and how much of the input, the energy for the cows, is coming from concentrates. Can you explain a bit about that?
Yes, thank you. I think that's very interesting questions, and that is because you have to admit that, okay, there was some 20,000 liters per hectare. So the farmers are not self-sufficient to raise their own feed on the farm, and you can say with this intensity, half of the feed rations is about their own land, so the grass, so as well as silage, grass silage and fresh grass, and the other half is imported. And you can say 25% is imported as concentrates, and other 25% is imported as forage maize or byproducts from beet pulp, etc. That kind of it. But as well, between 25 till 30% is imported as concentrates.
Okay, thank you. Piotr, I come to you again. What of these habitats in the Biebrza National Park, with the aquatic verber, for instance, these specific birds, what kind of habitats can be managed by grazing instead of cutting? I see in many of these areas that cutting and removing the biomass or the hay is very expensive and difficult to organize. And I see more coming in, for instance, the Netherlands, that these vast nature areas are maintained more by grazing, with horses, cattle, and so on, sheep.
Okay, so most of the wetlands in Biebrza National Park are peatlands, and it's not good for grazing. Only those parts near a river, which are the different type of soil, not peatland, but this, I don't know English name of this soil, are good for grazing, and some mineral places as well. But it's looked like farmers are not interested in it anymore. It was grazed in the past on a quite big scale, but now farmers tend to have cows in one places when they could feed them artificially, not because it's milk cows mainly. So it is difficult to have it milk every day, going to the pasture, going back, and it's for intensive milk production. It's not very good for farmers, so they tend to abandon this land, and this is a problem also because these pastures, these grazed areas near a river are a great habitat for waders, and we lost it if the grazing will stop totally.
Okay. Thank you. André, have you any points to add on these questions? Otherwise, I would go to a more general discussion point about the relation between permanent grassland and valuable natural habitats and dairy production.
Yeah. But we have some more questions from the chat.
Yes, we have.
So maybe first we try to ask about, because there's some question about for the Netherlands, I think for Jouke.
Jouke, yes, the last question.
How farmers in Netherlands deals with European nitrogen regulation, 170 kilograms of nitrogen from natural fertilizer per hectare. Jouke?
Interesting questions. Well, there is now a debate ongoing, but still we have a derogation. So farmers, it's allowed that they have apply. It depends, of course, on which soil type, but between 230 and 250. Well, if they going back to 170? Well, the movements then is they have to export the surplus of manure. And so, on the other hand, they have to import mineral fertilizer. So they cannot use their own manure. So that's, I think, that's the movement. So they have to make more costs. You have to keep in mind that farmers have to pay if they export their manure. So arable farmers getting money from the dairy farmers to use that manure.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, they have to buy now more mineral fertilizer. And well, as you know, at this moment, it's not cheap to the mineral fertilizer.
It's expensive.
It's very expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Maybe somebody would like to ask in live question at this moment, because we have discussions. So we have many participate people in the conference and the meeting. So maybe somebody would like to ask the question live, yeah? Okay, nobody asking. So maybe Hein, you are going to your presentation.
Yes, then I share again my presentation. I have some questions. question is, can you see it all? Yeah.
Yeah.
Grazing on permanent grassland is not easy because of the wet soils, low quality of the grass, long distance from farm to pasture, for instance, narrow fields. How to improve grazing? And that's not only in the Biebrza National Park, but on valuable natural habitats, on peat soils, for instance, and animal production in more general context in Europe. Because on peat soils, animal culture is not easy, plowing is not easy. So the best thing to use these peat soils is by permanent grassland. But how to fit the grazing and improve the grazing in the farm? Jouke, you're a dairy farming expert. Can you say some words about it?
Well, as I said in my presentation, grazing is on our peatland is possible. That is only because we have the water management in the ditches is very controlled. So it is possible that, for example, it is possible to graze already in April or something, the cows or the young stock. But it is only due because the water level then in ditches is controlled on a lower level. But that is, of course, that is only for grassland used for production. So if you, that is also a conflict with other values of grassland. So it depends on what we as society or decide what kind of value we are using. So if you control the water level, it has a negative effect of other values, for example, for birds and other types. So yes, it is possible to graze on peatland, but it costs a lot of investment, I think, to control the water level in that area.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is there anybody who want to add to that point?
Yes, I could say something from the Biebrza point of view. We have this non-intensive agriculture in the past, and we had something which we call free grazing. So the cows were allowed to go into the marshes. They graze when they wanted, and they coming back to the barn for a night. And the problem is intensification, because if farmer have 5 cows, he could send them into the marshes, and then when they come back, they milk them and other things. But if he has 100 cows or 200 cows, I don't think it's possible.
Yes.
with milk cows. Maybe it would be much easier if we have meat cows, but I think it's not very popular in Poland, because I think we don't have a market for such meat, because it's too expensive for Poles, I suppose. I'm not an expert, but with intensive agriculture, with a big flocks of cows, which farmers has, this free grazing is not possible anymore. And in the past, it was a main way of grazing in Biebrza Valley.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we can see on the Biebrza River swimming cows.
Yes, but it's now stopping. Now it's stopping. Now these swimming cows are going to the history now,
Yeah.
which is very sad indeed, because they created a very good habitat for birds.
Yes, I think I can imagine. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, we still have grazing going on, but these are not cows. Also, in the park, we have a free roaming Polish Polish horses. But it's a rather small scale activity. But well, horses are doing a great job for the habitat as well.
Paul, Newell-Price, in UK, they have also difficult soils in the uplands, for instance. They graze often sheep and beef, I guess. What are the experiences from of the farmers in UK with grazing on these type of soils? Paul? Yeah? You hear me? No. Any other one who want to add for this point? Then I come to my third question here. What kind of grassland management is needed to preserve the typical peatland landscape, which is biodiversity and environmental values, and to offer farmers suitable grass and fodder? So the question is, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. The question is, how to optimize grassland management in this area? Piotr Stypinsky, have you any idea about this point?
You know, Hein, very well that it's a very difficult question, because as was said before during our discussion, in some situations it's a conflict between farmers and ecologists and nature protected people from different organizations, from birds organization, for example. So I agree that at present moment, cutting looks kind of the optimal management, but cutting, it is again conflict, time of cutting, because for nature conservation purpose, it would be necessary to cut as late as possible, but for farmers as early as possible, because it's a quality. So I think we are not able to solve the problem. We can only advise farmers to be more friendly to environmental situation, but farmers expect that somebody pay them for the differences in milk, differences in yield production. And I remember very well the EGF conference many years ago in Uppsala, and farmers asked very simple question: who pay for biodiversity? Who will pay? I am for biodiversity, but okay, who will pay me a difference? And I think that question is still exists. And farmers, even if they apply for some extra supplementary payments, they are not happy because it's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of formal documents are needed. And generally, I think that it is very difficult to find the kind of the neutral solution for everybody. But of course, cutting looks better, but also, as was said, for example, by director of Biebrza National Park, it is not very easy, and it is complicated in technical and some management point of view.
Thank you. Clear answer. And it comes to my next observation that farmers are not happy to have grassland in protected areas, but how can we increase the attractiveness for them? And I come to the fifth point, point 5, on this discussion slide. Is there a role for society for extra support to farmers in these highly appreciated but vulnerable areas? So extra money, or is there what kind of extra support we can farmers offer that they continue management that is needed to protect these areas. Piotr, maybe you have any idea about this? Piotr Stypinsky and Artur.
Who first?
Artur, you first, yes?
Okay. I think one basic conclusion which is supposed to come out from our discussion is that farmers, they, especially around protected areas, I'm quite sure they would be interested into participation in the protection of the biodiversity. But of course, this must be a business, so that means money.
Yes.
And I think the agro-environmental schemes, they should be more flexible, more adapted, more open, especially if we would like to apply them in the protected areas and in the surroundings. And I think this is my basic conclusion from our discussion, and also our experience here from management point of view here in the Biebrza National Park, and I'm pretty sure in many other national parks and protected areas where grasslands are one of the main protection issue. So I would strongly recommend, I don't know how powerful we are as well, the webinar here and the organization, but also those who are listening and participating. I think that that should be a strong message from us that agro-environmental scheme, agro-environmental and climate schemes as a solution, they are very effective, but should be more open, more flexible, and more money is supposed to be involved into this process if we want to protect the biodiversity and also keep the balance between farming and nature protection.
Yes, thank you. And Piotr Stypinsky, have you anything to add about this?
Oh, mute.
No, thank you. No, in this moment.
But we have another question on the chat. What about development and connection with the agrotourism in this area? I think in this area on the park, national park.
That's a good point, agrotourism.
I read the question on the chat.
Yes.
Maybe Piotr or Artur would like to ask.
Well, we are very happy with agrotourism or ecotourism, and it's of course going on. We have very nice and very good examples, but of course, in the relation with the management, the more biodiversity, the more interest in bird watching, wildlife watching, and so on, so on. So, if we want to have an ecotourism on spot here and agrotourism, we have to take care of care of our values, which support this kind of tourism. So the agrotourism have been developed throughout the time. We have many good examples, and unfortunately, those dealing with agrotourism, they are not clue partners if we take in mind management activities.
Yes.
Well, they are promoting small-scale agriculture and so on. They are promoting nature protection, high values of it.
But Artur, are there also already situations that agrotourism organizations, hotels, and so on, pay for management of the area?
There are such examples, but it's not a significant. Significant role, let's say. Because,
to my opinion, that would be one of the points for extra support to farmers. Now you see the farmer has the costs in maintaining, or the natural the park organization. They make the cost from the management, and other organizations, tourists, and so they profit from the situation and the attractive landscape. So
maybe I can say something. Biebrza marshes are very specific, and we'll never have many tourists here because there is a very specialized tourism here. So, for example, all tourists in Biebrza National Park during all year, the number of these tourists could be lesser than one day in Tatra National Park, in one place even. So we'll never have many tourists because it's not very attractive for for usual people, normal people, let's say. These marshes, mosquitoes, and etc. So it will never be very significant. It always be losing with agriculture, intensive agriculture in Canis. Yeah.
It's good for you and good for nature.
yes, thank you.
And we as well have a comment on the chat. It's from Paloma. Paloma, I think, from Spain. In Dona National Park is southwest Spain, which is in mainly on marshes. We have a native breed of meat cows. They are called Marshy Cows. So she can give us more information about that.
As a
special kind of cows in Spain.
Yes, if I can say something, I'm not a specialist on this agriculture, but I think the problem is there is no market for such meat in Poland, because if it would be, if farmers could earn money on this, they would already find a way, those cows or other cows, but they would already do this. And if they not, I think it's not, they can't earn money, big money for this.
Good moment to start with this business, Piotr. Let's go on.
But I think it's a good idea because one of the conclusions should be oriented to the policymakers in the local scale, local policymakers, local governments, but also the policymakers in the Brussels, in the European Union. I think that the problem is not only here, the problem is general, and if we want to save our grassland, permanent grassland for future, probably we have to change a little bit the global agricultural policy in Europe. So that could be conclusion after our seminar.
Yes, thank you. Is there any last question, Andrei?
We don't see any more questions, so I think because the time is going on. So Hein, maybe thank you for your time, and I would like to ask Piotr Stypinsky to lead the rest and end of the webinar.
Yes, thank you, but we decided before that the final words would be given to Paul Newell-Price, leader of our project. So I think that Paul is ready for make some summarize of our meeting.
Paul, switch on microphone. Yeah, it's ready.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Well, no, thanks everybody. I wasn't really being prepared to sum up the full discussion, but it's been really interesting. The amount of ground that we've covered this morning is really impressive within Poland, Czech Republic, the Netherlands. And I think it's thrown up a lot of challenges that I hadn't really expected in terms of the degree of challenges to protect some of these habitats. And this sort of conflict between food production and biodiversity particularly is a really interesting one. And I think there's a number of hurdles to get over before we meet those challenges, but it's given us lots and lots of food for thought. We've got plenty of really good questions in the chat and in the Q&A, which we will summarize. So our challenge will be to try and produce a summary of those questions and answers, which will be a useful resource for us going forward in terms of how we develop discussions around policy options and policy mechanisms and financial mechanisms into the future. So it's been really interesting. So really for me, I'd just like to thank all participants. It's a shame we couldn't meet in person, but we all know why that wasn't possible. I just hope that some of us will have the opportunity one day to travel to Biebrza National Park to see it in person. So yeah, thank you to all the speakers. Thanks to Dina. Thanks to the interpreters and Carolina at Consilife for organising today's webinar. As I say, thanks to the speakers, thanks to the moderators for all the effort put in and for bearing with us with one or two technical glitches, which always occur on these occasions from time to time. Before we go, I'd like to draw your attention to an event coming up. If I share my screen, hopefully you'll be able to see a slide. So coming up towards the end, can you see my slide there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, we see.
Yes, we see.
Great. Okay. So this is an event, European Grassland Federation's annual meeting, which is coming up at the end of June this year. And this is quite timely because the final date for sort of early bird registration is at the end of this month, April the 30th. And the meeting will be in Caen in France, in Normandy, where I used to work, as it happens. And the subject is on grassland at the heart of circular and sustainable food systems. So lots of very interesting material there. SUPER-G will be featuring with a number of presentations and posters. And there's lots of other very interesting presentations as part, and also field visits as part of that. So if you are able to go, as I say, the final registration or final early bird registration is end of this month, and deadline for registration is end of May. And you can see the details there in terms of the website for registering and finding out more information. I will stop sharing and just leaves me to say again, thank you to everybody for joining. Look forward to seeing some people in Caen, if not possibly on the next stakeholder webinar, which may be, we're thinking in the Boreal region in Sweden or possibly in Spain, Mediterranean region. That's to be decided, but we'll let all the stakeholders know where that's going to be held and provide you with all the information for the next webinar / seminar. And we hope maybe that one may be in person, but we'll see how things go.
Oh, just one sentence, if it's possible, okay?
Sure, yeah.
I'd like to thank you also for participation and for active discussion. And it's my great honor, and I am very happy. This year is exactly 50 years of my research activity in grassland science. So in June, 50 years ago, I graduated my Warsaw Agricultural University, and from 50 years, I try to do many things in grassland science, in teaching, in research. So your presence here and your activity and your discussion and the fact that you accept our invitation is excellent gift for me. So thank you, all of you, especially thanks to Paul and to group of people from SUPER-G, but also for, I would like thanks all speakers, all participants, and my old friends, Hein, Jouke, and others. So thank you, and now we can close officially our meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Piotr, and thanks, Hein.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.